Uh, a couple of disclaimers. Uh, I grew up in a family many,
Hey,
many
Herb.
years ago. Yeah.
Herb, shall I give you an introduction
Yeah,
first, and then turn it over to
yeah,
you?
yeah,
Okay. Fine.
yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. Let's do that.
Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting.
No.
Okay. Um, so we're really delighted to have Herman Schwartz with us this morning, who's going to do a reprise of, um, I guess I don't know if you call it a lecture or discussion that he did at our Wise Aging retreat, and that Harriet Kinberg was instrumental in getting put on again today. So, just a brief background about Herman. He is a professor of law emeritus at American University, Washington College of Law. Long career in academia, publishing, community service, focusing his attention on issues of civil rights and civil liberties as they played out in courts and prisons across the world. He's worked with the UN Human Rights Advocacy Group, Helsinki Watch, the U.S. Israel Civil Liberties Law Program, which he founded, the ACLU Prison Project, which he founded, Washington College of Law's Human Rights Center, and other organizations. And in May 2006, he was awarded the 2006 Champion of Justice Award by the Alliance for Justice. His special interest in recent years has been the emerging democracies of Eastern Europe. He has served as an advisor on constitutional and human rights reform to numerous Central and Eastern European nations, as well as former Soviet Union nations. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to Herm, who can tell us about his Yiddish background story, and then we'll go into the program itself. I just wanted to tell people we have enough people that it would be better for questions. We will take a couple minutes after each poem if there are questions. Please just put them in the chat, and you can just send it to everyone, and I'll try to monitor that. So, Herm, I'm going to turn it over to you.
I've been interested in poetry in general ever since I was a kid in high school. And I grew up in a family that spoke Yiddish. My parents came to this country around 1920 or 21. I think this is, I guess, the 100th anniversary of my mother's arrival. Yiddish was the language spoken at home. My father had a kosher butcher shop, and I went to Hebrew school, and the Yiddish just stuck with me through the years. And as I thought back about Yiddish poetry and about the Yiddish language itself, I grew and began to read some of it. I was struck by what I had always felt, which was that it was a lovely language, a gentle language, a folk language in many ways. And it was, of course, as I said, probably my first, I didn't say, but probably my first language. I am not a specialist in this. I am not what's called a Yiddishist. I have friends, some of whom are no longer with us. A man like Abe Brumberg, some of you may know his son Dan, who teaches at Georgetown, some people at the Library of Congress, and then, of course, the Yiddish Book Center at Amherst, although I don't get the impression that they spend very much time on Yiddish poetry. And when I started to read Yiddish poetry, both in English, I was struck by how good it was, how it spoke to me, because of my father's family, which had been exterminated in the Holocaust. I never knew any of them. And the Holocaust, of course, dominates a great deal of Yiddish poetry. As it happens, the new Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, mentioned in a speech this week that this is International Holocaust Memorial Week. And you'll see how the development of Yiddish poetry came along. Yiddish poetry, Yiddish literature, as a modern enterprise, is really only about, well, had a lifespan, because I don't think it really exists anymore, of about, in its prime, 70, 80 years. It began in roughly the 1880s. It was a delayed product of the Enlightenment. And in the middle of the 19th century, Jews began to really enter into modern life. And Yiddish literature really began with the 2 or 3 great figures that you were probably familiar with. A man named Shalom Abramovitz, who was known as Mendele Moshe Sephorim, Mendele the bookseller, Shalom Aleichem, and they wrote obviously prose, and I.B. Peretz, who wrote some poetry, a very famous long poem called the Monish, but that was a minor part of his outpouring. At the same time, secular Hebrew poetry began to develop with Bialik and Chernyakhovsky and many others. Some of them went to Israel quite early, others later. Yiddish poetry started with what were called the Sweatshop Poets. It quickly developed primarily in the United States with people who worked in the sweatshops. And the poetry was basically social poetry about the trials and tribulations of that. At about the same time, and this is around the first decade of the 20th century, Yiddish began to bloom, one might say, in Eastern Europe. Peretz, Shalom Aleichem, and Yiddish poetry developed there too. Yiddish poetry ultimately developed in 3 centers: New York, East Europe, where it was Warsaw, Vilna, and Kiev. Kiev, of course, the Russian poets, who, as you know, were murdered by Stalin in 1952. And in, as I said, New York and East Europe. The East European branch withered, or to be more precise, was murdered. The Holocaust cut that off. And many of them, and particularly one considered the greatest of them all, one of the greatest of all Yiddish poets, Abraham Sutzkever, moved to Israel, those who survived. And you got an additional burst of Yiddish poetry from these Holocaust survivors. Sutzkever himself lived a very long time an amazing life. I'll touch on that later, and died in 2010
We better get to
at the age of 97. The modern Yiddish poetry in New York really began in 1907, and with a group called the Junge, the Young Ones, the leader of which was a young man, a shoemaker named Mani Leib. And the thrust of this was to bring Yiddish poetry into the modern world, to absorb the developments in modern English poetry, French poetry, and the like, to be not socially conscious, to be much more introverted, much more reacting as individuals. As others began to come, including some major women poets, and we'll read some of theirs, the interests and the styles began to develop differently. So you got a great poet named Moshe Halpern, who was sardonic and bitter and harsh and experimental. He died very young, and ultimately produced a great many poets. And among those, the generally acknowledged most prominent was Jacob Rothstein.
Okay, you want to get
And
to poems now.
he died in the 70s, and with that, Yiddish poetry kind of withered. As I said, there was the flair in Israel, and today it is essentially a dead language, except, of course, in the huge and growing ultra-Orthodox community. But they're not terribly interested in modern poetry or the kind of poetry people outside that community read. Now I've got here, just to tell you how we'll function, I've got here about 10 or 12 poems. I'm going to read the English first. Most of them are short, and then I'll read the Yiddish. But for those poems which are long, and some of them are, I'll just read one stanza in Yiddish so that you can get a sense of the flow, of the rhythms, of the structures of these poems. And I'll start with Mani Leib and read.
Shall I show the English, Herm?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, wait, David has to put it on the screen.
Well, before you do, though, David, Mani Leib was a shoemaker, and it was sort of, there was a sweatshop version of shoemaking in New York, and he wrote a poem called I Am. And I'll just read the last two sentences. In Brownsville, Yehupitz, beyond them even, my name shall ever be known, O Muse. And I'm not a cobbler who writes, thank heaven, but a poet who makes shoes.
Which page is this on, Herm? Do I have that or not?
Yeah,
Okay.
that page is on page 130.
You're going to start with that, right?
Yeah.
To the Gentile poet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
Okay.
David, you've got the right poem on.
yeah.
Okay.
All of the poems that I have, and that will be on your screen, are from a marvelous anthology by Irving Howe, Ruth Weiss of Harvard, and a man named Honya Shmeruk, who was a specialist in Russian poetry, I think.
And the name and authors are in the chat if anybody's interested.
Yeah, and if this leaves you or increases your interest in this poetry, I urge you to get this book. It goes up to 1987, and the translations are by major American poets like John Hollander, Adrian Rich, and writers. Cynthia Ozick translated a lot of Rothstein's poems.
Okay.
And so let me start first with a set of two sonnets that Manny Labe wrote in the last 20 years of his life. And these are remarkable, strict Shakespearean poets, sonnets. Other sonnets, they're 14 lines. They're 3 4-line stanzas. The first 2 set out sort of the poet's situation, what he wants to talk about, his concerns. The third is what's called the turning quatrain, where he responds to that. And he concludes with a rhymed couplet. Manny Labe did as precise Shakespearean sonnet as you'll find. The rhyme scheme, for those of you interested in this, is ABBA all the way. And you'll hear that. And you'll hear it probably in the Yiddish as well. Just a small point. In the second stanza, there's something called a throstle. It's that in Yiddish and it's here in English. It's basically a songbird, such as a thrush. Okay. To the Gentile poet, heir of Shakespeare, shepherds and cavaliers, bard of the Gentiles, lucky you are indeed. The earth is yours. It gives your fat hog feed. Where'er it walks, your muse grazes on hers. You've set a throstle in your tree and trilled, still answered by all the far-flung elsewheres, by fullness of fields, by wide city squares, by sated hearts, serenity fulfilled. But I, a poet of the Jew, a folk of wild grass grown on foreign earth, dust-bearded nomads, grandfathers of dearth, the dust of fairs and texts is all that feeds it. I chant amid the alien corn, the tears of desert wanderers under alien stars. Zum goyischen Poet, a Jölisch von Shakespeare, von Pasticher und Ritter, as Woil und Woil is dir, du goyische Poet. Die Erde ist deine, wo der fette Chaser tritt, sie geht im Fittergosen und geht dein Muse fitter. Du sich nur, wer der Drossel läuft dein Zweig, und Zwitter, und dir wird entfernt von allen Räumen von Fell de Fulvezet, die Rechäubes von der Stadt, die volle Schauber und gesättigte Mitte. Und da bin ich, an nicht gedacht, a Poet bei jedem, gewachsen mit dem Wildgras auf nicht unser Erd von Sedes, mit der Vogler, mit verstäubte Berg, was nähern sich auf Staub von Siphon und Jeriden. Und sing ich auf fremde Welt die Tränen von Vogler in am Midbar unter fremde Stern. Any comments or questions on either of those? Okay. Let me turn then to the second poem. It's entitled, it's also a sonnet. It's on page.
I did have a question, Herm. Sorry. I was muted. Sorry.
Oh.
What I noticed was the Yiddish, first of all, seemed more musical to me than the English, and certainly more musical than what you're used to with German. So I wonder if you might comment on that.
Well, this is a translation by John Hollander. Hollander is one of the major Jewish poets, writing in English, of course. Translations are terribly difficult.
But do you think it's the Yiddish language also that makes it more musical?
I think it was written for the Yiddish language. German actually, in Schubert Lieder, in German opera, is actually quite beautiful. And in German verse. I read only a little bit of that. I don't read German terribly well, but I've read some Heine with the help of translations. And it works very well. But translations are, Auden once said, to read a translated poem is to play tennis without a net. I tried my hand on a poem I'll read later because I wasn't happy with the poem, with the translation. It was terribly difficult, and I came away with more respect for the translator of that poem. So now I noticed in the chat from Jean Nordhaus, amid the alien corn. This, for Hollander, I think is a pun on a pun on a pun, because amid the alien corn is taken from Ode to a Nightingale by Keats. And it refers to something in the Bible, Ruth, following Naomi. And Hollander stuck this in there, God knows why, but for those people who know the Keats poem, it suddenly jumps out at you. Jean, is that?
Yeah, so it's not in the, I didn't hear it in the Yiddish, so I wasn't sure.
No, zwischen the fremde Korn or something. But I mean, I think, I still don't know why Hollander put it in, because for the sort of people who read this, they're probably familiar with Ode to a Nightingale. Shall we go on to the next one?
Yeah, let's go on, yeah.
The next one is called Christmas. It's on the next page of the anthology. The bronze of bells aroused by the night sky. The town has frost, flares, incense on its breath. Their God arises joyfully from death, and the crowds carry on a pole on high his image. And their tread, heavy and blind, bears hate aloft. On every upper floor, children of Israel, fearful, count the more on you. God of mercies, being loving kind. While outside doors and shutters sings the snow, wide blue heavens dazzle the eye with frost. The night from crown to girdle is embossed with stars in quiet, but a shriek below rips peace away from its secluded life, the outcry of blood in terror of their knife. The Yiddish word for the Christmas is a word I've never come across before, and I tried to look it up and I couldn't find it. It's nittel. Maybe somebody in the audience knows. Die Nacht weckt euch das Kupfer von den Glocken. Mit Fackeln, Frost und Weile wacht die Stadt. Von Teut steht auf mein Frieden, sehe Gott, in Machenes trocken auf a heuchen Flocken sein de muss. Und sehe blinder, schwerer trockt Hass, und in die enge, stumme Stocken Israels Kinder dürfen zerschrocken. A Gott von Gott von Rachamim, auf dein Barot. In Hintertier und Lidden sinkt der Schnee. In breite, bläue Himmeln frostig blenden. Die Nacht und von ihr Kreun, bis ihre Lenden mit Stern und mit Ruhe. Nur ein Geschrei weiß die Ruhe von all ihre Schwester. Durchschreit das Blut in Angst vor sehr Messer.
So Herman, we have a couple comments and one question.
Yeah,
Okay, did you want to say something?
Let me make just one comment. To me, these two poems capture the pre-Holocaust concerns of the Yiddish poets in America. The fact that they are here in strangers in a strange language, and they're aware of the murderous anti-Semitism in Europe in the post-World War I period, and the I'll just point out that there are very powerful images in both these poems. Okay.
Yeah.
Janelle has commented that it means, quote, nothing night, Nittelnacht. And also says, traditionally one studies Torah die ganze Nacht auf Nittel. Okay, then we have a couple questions. Ed Grossman is asking, is this conflating Christmas with Easter when the pogroms were more prevalent?
I can only say it's entitled Christmas. I would guess both Easter and Christmas. Easter because the weather is warmer and it's good hunting weather.
And Christmas is the birth of Jesus, whom the Jews are supposed to have killed. So it has its own special anti-Semitism.
My daughter Susan commented that this is a rising from the dead, which would make it more appropriate, I guess, for Easter, the resurrection. Okay, so that's Mani Lab.
Herm, I'm sorry, one more question, and then we'll move on. Sorry. This is more of a general question from Arlene, who asked, does Yiddish use the Hebrew alphabet but is spoken differently? Can you discuss this?
Yeah, it uses the exactly the Hebrew alphabet with the sounds of the letters the same, because throughout Jewish history, the two languages were part of every day. You used Yiddish for ordinary things, and you used Hebrew for holy things, prayers, study of Talmud, and the like. And basically what happened is that sometime, I don't really know, but I would guess it must have been about the 10th or 12th century, the Jews who were in Germany before they were driven out about, I think, the 13th or 14th century, took the German that they spoke outside the home and Yiddishized it. Yiddish is a form of a dialect of German. Some Yiddish poets, the lesser poets, in order to make their poetry seem fancier, used a lot of Germanic words, which were understandable. They were kind of looked down upon because Yiddish had developed enough words in the vernacular to use for pretty much all regular uses. And of course, in Yiddish poetry, you find a lot of Hebrew expressions and Hebrew words, which makes it even harder to translate. But the short answer to your question, yes, it's the same alphabet.
Okay, on to the last thing.
Yeah, let's move on.
Yeah. The next poem is from one of the major poems, H. Levick, he called himself. And the poem is called Sacrifice. And it's one of the examples of the fact that although these poets were very modern in a lot of their subject matter, they did not forget they were Jews and had a very long tradition of storytelling and events. And of course, the one that was central to a great deal of poetry discussion was the Binding of Isaac, the Akedah. H. Levick was one of the major figures. He wrote a lot of his poetry in Europe and a lot here. He was a very active communist and was put in Siberia, in prison in Siberia, but he escaped and he wrote about his escape and came to America and wrote a great deal. Sacrifice. Bound hand and foot he lies on the hard altar stone and waits. Eyes half shut, he looks on his father standing there and waits. His father sees his eyes and strokes his son's brow and waits. With old and trembling hands, The father picks up the knife and waits. A voice from above cries, "Stop!" The hand freezes in air and waits. The vain throat suddenly throbs with the miracle of the test and waits. The father gathers up the son. The altar is bare and waits. Ensnared in thorns, a lamb looks at the hand with a knife and waits. This translation is by a man who has done a great many translations from Yiddish to and Hebrew to English, Robert Friend. The Hebrew title of this is, of course, Akeda. Legt auf den harten Mizbeach, die Hände und Fuß gebunden und wach. Seine Augen halb zu, halb offen. Guckt sie auf den Taten und wach. Der Tate setzt seine Augen. Geht mal glatt über den Stern und wacht. Der Tate nimmt in Hand der Messer, in zitterige, in alte Finger und wacht. Der Herz sich von oben nach Baskol. Halt ab, bleibt die Hand in Gliver und wacht. Geht der Hals mit all seinen Ohren, a Tanz in einem Ess von den Säuen und wacht. Sie tragt der Tate dem Such, so nach unter, bleibt ledig und frei der Mizbeach und wacht. Steht Alarm in Dornbusch verflochten und guckt der Hand mit dem Messer und wacht.
We have one question, Herm, which is a general question. Unless you did you want to say anything else about the poem before we ask the question?
No, I think it's quite self-explanatory. I notice Ed has a comment.
Yeah, he has a question and a comment. You can take it.
Yeah, let me turn to Ed because what I was going to say, he has in mind. Ed?
He's asking, are there transliterations of these to get a sense of rhythm and rhyme?
Not that I know of.
Oh, no.
Not that I know of.
And his comment is, sounds like the last verse had a different scan in the scan. Is that the right word, Ed? In the Yiddish versus the English. Okay.
Oh yeah, very much. Last.
The last set of 6 lines or something like that had a different rhythm to it.
Well, the English translation has pretty much the same rhythm all the way through. The first and second lines of each verse are multi-syllable, and then it ends with "and waits." There are tetrameter, 3 beats to most of the lines. The last one in Yiddish, that's similar until you get to the last 2 lines, whereas the prior, Ed's ear is right, the last 2 lines are longer than a lot of the preceding lines. The other thing, I thought you were, there is the Amichai poem about the same kind of miracle stop, but the Amichai poem, and there's
the real hero of the
the real hero of the Akeda
Coming.
was the, pardon?
What?
Okay, please mute yourself, everybody.
The last line of the Amichai poem is, my hero in this story is the ram. Here it's slightly changed. You don't really know, except that, first of all, it's a lamb, not a full-blown. So that's sort of almost parallel to the young boy having been a possible sacrifice. And it's just left here, ensnared in thorns, a lamb with nothing more.
I'm struck with the chorus of "and waits." It's very dramatic, and I think it works beautifully. But I'm thinking that most of these people in Europe were waiting for the knock on the door, that would. And this guy was sent to Siberia, and it's so there's something about this waiting, constant repetition that feels like it's almost a theme of these. Of these poets.
Okay, why don't we move ahead to the next poem?
For most of these poems, I don't know what year they were written. I do know for a couple where it's quite relevant. Now, in the flowering of Yiddish poetry in America, one of the things that it did was it gave women a great opportunity. Those women who came to this country very often alone. One of the major figures here was Katya Valadovsky. She was born in White Russia, which incidentally was where my parents came from. And she was briefly associated with groups of poets in Warsaw, and came to, she was also a teacher, and she came to America in 1935. And she is a very, very strong feminist and a very, she doesn't limit, as you'll see, her poetry to women's issues. But she did write a great deal about the plight of women. And she wrote a series called Women's Songs, 9 poems. And they cover a very, very broad range of things. And they're, I hope you get interested enough in some of these people to get their poetry, because really many of them, and I hope you share this feeling, are quite wonderful. And she's one of the most wonderful. And she wrote this series of 9 women's songs. This is the second one. I will come to him who was the first to give me woman's joy and say, husband, I've given my gentle glance to another too. And one night laid my head beside his. And now I have my grief, like bees swarming and stinging around my heart, and no honey to soothe the wound. And when he takes me by the braid, I'll fall down and lie on the doorstep like Sodom in stone. I'll lift my hands to my head as my mother did lighting the candles, but my fingers will stand like 10 enumerated sins. Sins. Oh my God, I really ruined that one. But my fingers will stand like 10 enumerated sins. This was translated by Irving Feldman, who I think is still alive, who is a very distinguished American poet. As you see here, they give the date of the poem. Von Freuenlieder. Zu dem will ich kommen, wer so hat der Ersten mir mein Freudenfried gebracht und sagen, Mann, ich hab noch einem meinen stillen Blick vertreut und in der Nacht lem ihm mein Kopf gelegt. Erst hab ich mein Saal. Wie binnen Ungestorbene mein Herz gebracht und hab kein Honig nicht auf Linde und mein Wund. Und so wird der Mann mir nehmen von Sab, will ich niederbüchen sich auf beide Füße und bleiben auf dem Schwell, wie die Versteinerung von Sodom. Ich will die Hände aufheben zum Kopf, wie sie fleckt mein Mama ton beim Menschenlicht. Noch wollen meine Finger stehen, wie 10 gezählte sind.
We have no questions on that one, Herm.
Okay. I would. I wanted to mention all of these poets use very vivid images from ordinary life, as well as more romantic images of nature, which Manny Lay, you noticed, used a lot, the blue sky, the stars, and the like. Yep, Barbara. David, did you have?
Yeah, we have a couple more just came in. Okay, let's get some. Barbara asked a question. Good alliteration, comment in the last line. Janelle comments, I don't think Valadovsky wrote in meter. Ed asks, is there, I guess that was in response to, is there any rhyme or rhythm to that poem?
No, as a matter of fact, many of the poets wrote in free verse quite deliberately. They saw that as part of the freedom that they wanted to exercise to get away from tight forms or to get away from the possible rigidity. Although, as you saw in Mani Laib, at the last years of his life, he used the Shakespearean sonnet form. Others moved in and out.
All right, shall we go to the next one?
Yeah. The next one is very different. I think, by the way, there was somebody who had a comment on Katya Valadovsky. No. Okay.
Wait, this is not God of Mercy.
Yeah.
But Ed has the wrong.
Ed,
it's
David.
God
of Mercy. It's
on page 330.
Well, I don't have
331.
331. Oh, it starts at the bottom of this page.
Right.
Yeah, this is
Okay.
it.
Yeah,
This is
yeah,
it.
yeah. Here, because it's a long poem, I'll only read one stanza of the Yiddish.
Ed, do you have the whole poem though of God of Mercy in that?
Yeah.
It goes on to the next page. I don't know if you
Yeah,
got it.
yeah, we should.
Well, okay.
Okay. O God of mercy, for the time being, choose another people. We're tired of death, tired of corpses. We have no more prayers for the time being. Choose another people. We've run out of blood for victims. Our houses have been turned into desert. The earth lacks space for tombstones. There are no more lamentations nor songs of woe in the ancient texts. God of mercy, sanctify another land, another Sinai. We've covered every field in stone with ashes and holiness, with our crones, with our young, with our infants. We have paid for each letter in your commandments. God of mercy, lift up your fiery brow. Look on the peoples of the world. Let them have the prophecies and holy days, who mumble your words in every tongue. Teach them the deeds and the ways of temptation. God of mercy, to us give rough clothing of shepherds who tend sheep, of blacksmiths at the hammer, of washerwomen, cattle slaughterers, and lower still. And O God of mercy, grant us one more blessing. Take back the divine glory of our genius. Written in 1945. I'll just read the first stanza so you can get the flow of it. This draws from a prayer in Hebrew, El Chanun V'Rachamun, God of mercy and sympathy. And each of the stanzas opens with El Chanun. And the first one, and in Yiddish, it has even more of a vernacular feel. El Chanun, klei bois einander Volk, derweil. Wir sind mit von Starben und gestorben. Wir haben nicht kein Tefilles mehr. Klei bois einander Volk, derweil. Wir haben nicht kein Blut mehr, auf zu sein erkorben. Am Mittwoch ist geworden unser Stub. Die Erde ist karg für uns auf Quellen. Nicht doch kein Kindes mehr für uns. Nicht doch kein Klogwid in die alte Sephoren. I've always thought, as Mary and I were reading this, I thought about the last two lines, which in a way take back what is being asked. Give us rough clothing, blacksmiths, and then it ends, and lower still, and O God of mercy, grant us one more blessings. Take back the divine glory of our genius. In Yiddish, it reads, Nimm zu von uns die Schiene von Gaunus. Take from us the Holy Spirit of the great sages. Some of you may have heard of the Vilna Gaon, a great holy and towering sage. The bottom line is to take also this from us.
Okay, I think you've answered questions. There were a lot of questions about that last line. What is she referring to?
Okay. Okay. We now
Yeah.
come.
Let's move on.
Wait, Ed,
Oh,
Ed had another.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, well, there is one more. Okay. I didn't know how many questions you wanted per poem. So, but if you want to keep talking, we'll keep talking. Is this sort of sacrilegious or against the rabbis?
Oh, no, I don't think it's sacrilegious or against the rabbis. I think what it is an awareness that as so long as the Holy Spirit animates our great sages, they're going to go after us. We will still be Jews because it's that which makes us Jews. I think that's what that is. Okay.
Okay, moving on.
We now come to the man the poet who probably became the most prominent and in many ways the most brilliant in the way he used the Yiddish language, Jacob Rothstein. He became more than anybody else, I think, in America, the voice of what was in Katya Valadovsky's poem there, became a preoccupation with him, with his quarrels with God, his complicated relationship with God, what it did to him as both a Jew and a human being, his use of the Yiddish language is very complicated. He made up a lot of words, and he came to the United States as a young man. He was 18 years old in 1915. He somehow knew English and immediately enrolled at NYU Law School. There's no indication that he ever practiced law. He immediately started to write poetry. And then he immediately hit a tragic note because he wrote a poem after the terrible pogroms in Ukraine and elsewhere in Russia, called 1919. And he was curious. he started with that and ended essentially with the Holocaust. He almost foresaw what was going to happen because he made a trip to Europe in the mid-1930s and saw to Poland and elsewhere. He came from Poland. He saw what was coming. So this is one of his very long poems. It's a hard poem to read in either language. And I will, this is part of his quarrel with God, as he writes somewhere, the God of his unbelief.
Is magnificent.
Now,
Wait,
yeah,
the God
the God of my unbelief is magnificent. Yeah. I want to say first, so that you'd understand the context of this poem as it goes. It was written in 1946, right after the opening of the various camps, without Jews. The reference to broken pots is, as some of you know, God's greatness was supposed to be enclosed in various vessels and pots, and they got shattered. And the Kabbalah apparently is based on these. And that's the reference there. I've divided this in my copy into 6 stanzas, and I'll pause to indicate the stanza break. And I'll read just Yiddish, one stanza. Without Jews, no Jewish God. If, God forbid, we should quit this world, your portents light would out. Abraham knew you in a cloud. Since then, you are the flame of our face, the rays our eyes blaze, our likeness whom we formed in every land and town, a stranger. Shattered Jewish skulls, shards of the divine, smashed, shame, pots. These were your light-bearing vessels, your tangibles, your portents of miracles. Now count these heads by the millions of the dead. Around you, the stars go dark, our memory of you obscured. Soon your reign will close, where Jews sowed a scorched waste. Dews weep on dead grass. The dream raped, reality raped, both blotted out. Whole congregations sleep. Babies, women, young, old, even your pillars, your rocks, the tribe of your saints, sleep their dead, eternal sleep. Who will dream you, remember you, deny you, yearn after you? Who will flee you only to return over a bridge of longing? No end tonight for an extinguished people. Heaven and earth wiped out, your tent void of light, flicker of the Jews' last hour, soon Jewish God, you will be gone. You'll see I changed some of the lines to be closer to what I saw was in the Yiddish. Cynthia Ozick translated most of these poems. I'll just read the last stanza. Die Nacht ist ewig fahrt heut Volk, Himmel und Erd abgewischt, so wäscht sich das Licht in deinem Arm gezählt, sie flammelt die letzte jiddische Schau. Jiddischer Gott, bist schon bald nicht da. Now, did I mention that this was written in 1946, before there was any expectation of a Jewish homeland or state of Israel?
Okay, no questions have come in on this one, Herm.
Okay. Mozart is this is part of Rothstein's imagination. Rothstein wasn't just a Holocaust poet. He wrote about a lot of other things. But I guess I chose the most powerful of the various poems because it seems to me the Holocaust dominated the poetry of most of the Yiddish poems, even the survivors, or even those who were not in Europe. As you can tell, you'll be able to tell from the Mozart poem, Rothstein was an avid Mozart fan. Not surprising, but he in particular. And he had a somewhat chauvinistic approach to Mozart. And I'll read the poem and you'll see. I dreamt that the Goyim crucified Mozart and dug him a donkey's grave. It was only the Jews who made him a God-man and kept his memory blessed. His apostle, I ran through the world converting everyone in sight. I snatched proselytes all over, Christians from Mozart. Marvel at the testament of music of the man divine. His song-nailed hands shine. Crucified singer, how his fingers go after laughter in deepest affliction. Through dooms of tears, more than himself he loves, his neighbor's ears. The Sermon on the Mount, how stark, how bereft, when you count what Mozart left.
Just read one verse.
I'll just read the one verse. So hat sich mir gechalmt, Groß Goyim haben Mozarten gekreuzigt und ihm begraben in ein Eselkäfer. Nur jeden im Gemacht war Gottsmensch und sein Gedächtnis gebencht. Now,
we just have 20 minutes left.
Actually, Ed had a comment. The Yiddish is rhymed actually just the first two stanzas are rhymed. The others have occasional rhymes: Troya, Oya, Cog, Bog, and so on. But what does one make of this poem? Mozart would have been shocked. He was a very religious Catholic and wrote a great mass. And no thoughts? Well, maybe.
Most people are muted, Herm. So
Oh,
almost everybody's muted, so that's why you're probably not. Do you want to, if anybody wants to answer Herm, unmute yourself.
Yeah, anybody have any comments? I've always enjoyed reading this poem, but I've never understood why we were,
we got one.
yeah.
Peggy Hiller?
Was it Jewish musicians who played his music? From Peggy.
Not especially. I don't know in the 18th century how many Jewish musicians played secular music.
Here's Susan.
Yeah.
No.
Susan, you want to unmute yourself?
Or I can read it if you like.
Okay.
Susan asks, I think the poet needed to find joy in all the pain, and no one like Mozart for joy.
Well, that's true. I mean,
Comment.
yeah, that was true in our family. I suppose so. This is, after all, a dream. But and there's no question of Mozart provided laughter in deep affliction. One of the ironies I've always thought about this poem is that much of the Sermon on the Mount comes from the Jewish Bible. So I think I'm not sure about the end.
Okay,
What
we
was
just
the-
have
Okay.
What was the sexism you were referring to?
The sexism?
Did you mention something about? No? Before
He
you
said
read this?
chauvinism.
Chauvinism.
Oh,
Chauvinism.
chauvinism, not sexism.
You mean Jewish chauvinism?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. The next poem is totally different in style, tone, and everything else. 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Let's make it. Okay.
Is this the one? Hagar leaves Abraham's house? Hey, is this the one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Itzhak Manger was the enfant terrible of Yiddish poetry. He had a deep thirst for alcohol. He traveled, started out in Warsaw. He had a sardonic view of the stories and events in the Hebrew Bible. He wrote his own version of the Bible, a long, very interesting Megillah of Esther, and he retold the many stories, starting from the very beginning, Eve and the apple. And he came to America for a while. he was in London quite a while during the war. He escaped the Holocaust, and from there he went to Israel. And this poem, Hagar Leaves Abraham's House, is preceded by Eve and the Apple. It's preceded by Sarah becoming pregnant. And if you remember the incident in the Bible, after Sarah becomes pregnant and Isaac is born, Sarah, she sees the two boys playing, and she orders Abraham to send Hagar away. And this is the departure of Hagar. The dawn is blew at the window. 3 times the rooster crowed. Outside the horse is neighing, impatient for the road. Hagar is worn with weeping. Her child lies in her arms. Once more she casts her eyes around the gray familiar room. Outdoors the teamster haggles for his fare with Abraham. All right, $6 even. After all, there are 2 of them. The pony scrapes the gravel as if it were saying, come on, give me a chance to show you how to make the highway tame. This is our portion, Ishmael. Darling, dry your tears. This is the way of the fathers with their long and reverent beards. She foresees herself abandoned in a railroad waiting hall in a foreign country, and she sobs into her Turkish shawl. Hagar, stop that sniveling. Woman, do you hear me or no? Hagar takes her bundle. Hagar turns to go. He stands with his silken cap on, the pious Abraham. Dear mother, tell me, does he feel my heart's defeated pain? The whip sings out, they've started. She sees through tear-rimmed eyes. The village houses slowly scrape backward in a haze. She takes the earth and heaven to be her witnesses. This is the way of the fathers with their long and reverend beards.
You just want to.
Yeah. As you see, this is a fairly long poem. So I will read just the last stanza. Und Hagar nimmt Fanedes, den Himmel und die Erde, und so fehlen sich die Oves mit der Leinge vom Berg. This tone, this attitude of irreverence, of sort of seeing the story from somewhat jaundiced point of view. And he does this with the entire Bible. This is Itzhak Munger. He was one of the most popular of all the Yiddish poets, and he probably contributed a lot to making Israel a place of Yiddish poetry for a few years until the poets who escaped the Holocaust died out.
Okay, no questions or comments.
Okay.
Really? Okay, we now come to the man, and this is the last one, to the man who is generally considered one of the great poets of the world, and the greatest of the Yiddish poets. He had a very long life, Abraham Sutzkever. He had a very long life. He was born in 1913 and wound up in Israel in 1947 and was there until 2010. He died at the age of 97. But the amount of living that he did was enough for 4 lifetimes. He started his life in Siberia, where his family went at the age of 2. And I've forgotten when he started to write poetry. It was very early in his life. And the poetry was all nature poetry, lyrical poetry about the beauties of the Siberian landscape, the light, the snow, the springtime, his friends. It was apparently a very good life. His parents had come from Vilna. His father died very young, I think while playing the violin, actually. The family went to Vilna, where he arrived at the age of 18 in 1932. There was a group there called Young Vilna. He tried to join. He was 19 or 18 at the time. They refused until a year or 2 later, a book of his poems was published. And then they immediately grabbed him as a member. The war came, the Nazis came to Vilna. The Vilna ghetto was built. He became a partisan. He became one of the fighters at the age of 23. He joined something called the Paper Brigade, all the while writing. He never stopped writing. The Paper Brigade was a bunch of Jews who were supposed to destroy all of the Jewish paper materials, Torahs, books of Talmud, all the rest. Instead, they hid them, dug them in the ground. At one point, he was caught. His wife was pregnant, gave birth. The Nazis made that illegal and poisoned his baby in his sight. He had already developed a tremendous reputation. And the president of Vilna, president of Lithuania, who was in exile in Russia, was also a poet. And he arranged for the Russians to send a plane to bring Sutzkever out. The first plane crashed. The second plane made it. The escape was through filthy sewage tunnels. And when they came out, they had to walk, he and his wife, in minefields till they finally got out. As a result, during this time, he kept writing poems about the resistance, about what it was like in the ghetto. He then went to Israel in 1947. As soon as he arrived, he somehow got the Histadrut to give him money to establish a Yiddish magazine, the Golden Chain, the Golden Acade. And he started to publish his own and the poems of other Yiddish poets. And it lasted a very long time.
We better get to the
Yeah,
point. Only in
and he
5
developed
minutes.
a world reputation. The poem I'm going to read is, I think, of all the Yiddish poems, my own favorite. The Lead Plates at the Rome Press. The Rome Press was a 2-century-old press that published both holy books and secular books. And this is the story of an effort by the Vilna partisans to use the plates to melt them down to make bullets. The Lead Plates at the Rome Press. By the way, the press is back in existence and publishing. The Lead Plates at the Rome Press. Arrayed at night, light fingers stretched through bars to clutch the lit air of freedom. We made for the press plates to seize the lead plates at the Rome printing works. We were dreamers. We had to be soldiers and melt down for our bullets the spirit of the lead. At some timeless native lair, we unlocked the seal once more. Shrouded in shadow by the glow of a lamp, like temple ancients dipping oil into candelabras of festive gold, so pouring out line after lettered line did we. Letter by melting letter with the lead, liquefied bullets gleamed with thoughts. A verse from Babylon, a verse from Poland, seething, flowing into the one mold. Now must Jewish grit, long concealed in words, detonate the world in a shot. Who in Vilna ghetto has beheld the hands of Jewish heroes clasping weapons, has beheld Jerusalem in its throes, the crumbling of those granite walls, grasping the words smelted into lead, recognizing their voices by heart. The Vilna Ghetto, September 12, 1943. I will read
This is one verse. 'Cause there's
again. I'll read a couple of verses just to give you the flavor. Wir haben die Bleierplatten von
Which
Rome's
verse is it?
Druckerei. The lead plates at the Rome
Oh, it's
Press.
the first verse. Okay.
Wir haben wie Finger gestreckt durch Garten zu fangen die lichtige Luft von der Frei. Durch Nacht sich gezeugen, zu nehmen die Platten, die bleierne Platten von Roms Druckerei. Wir, Träumer, bedarfen jetzt werden Soldaten und schmelzen auf Keulen, dem Geist von dem Blei. And then I'll jump down to the last, to the next to last stanza, the one in which they talk about what was flowing from the lead into bullets. A verse from Babylon, a verse from Poland. Das Blei hat geleuchtet beim Ausgissen Keulen, Machashavas, Gangen an aus noch an aus. Aschure von Bavel, Aschure von Polen, gesotten, gefleizt in derselbe Gemoss. Die jiddische Gewohre in Werten verheulen, muss aufreißen itzt die Welt mit a Schoss. In Yiddish, it's very regularly rhymed, A, B, A, B, A, B, yeah, all the way through. They're all 6-line stanzas. They're formal, I think because of the subject. I'll read just one more poem to end on an up note. I'll just read it in English. There was a woman, Yanova Batasheva, who hid Sutskavar and brought food not only to his family, but to many others.
Wait,
And
Ed
he-
doesn't have the right thing.
This is
Last
the
page?
Yeah,
Okay.
Last
page
page.
700. And Sutskavar planted a tree in her memory at the Yad Vashem and the avenue of righteous Gentiles. What he did in his last years was to keep a diary in which he wrote poems. And that's where this date comes from. He wrote this poem in 1980. This, Cynthia Ozick, as you see, translated. And when I go up as a pilgrim in winter to recover the place I was born and the twin to self I am in my mind, then I'll go back in black snow as a pilgrim to find the grave of my savior, Yanova. She'll hear what I whisper under my breath. Thank you. You saved my tears from the flame. Thank you, children and grandchildren you rescued from death. I planted a sapling. It doesn't suffice in your name. Time in its gyres spins back down the flue, faster than nightmares of nooses can ride, quicker than nails. And you, my savior, in your cellar you'll hide me, ascending in dreams as a pilgrim to you. You'll come from the yard in your slippers, crunching the snow so I'll know. Again, I'm there in the cellar, degraded and low. You're bringing me milk and bread sliced thick at the edge. You're making the sign of the cross. I'm making my pencil its pledge. Any, as you see, Cynthia did that.
Okay, it doesn't look like we have any questions on that.
Okay.
Okay, any last words, Herm?
Yeah, I hope you enjoyed hearing them. As you might be able to tell, I really enjoyed reading them. So thanks for joining me and giving me a chance to dig back into these poems. Unless, well, just thanks to Harriet for whose idea this was, and to David for making it possible to to me, this is all a foreign language, this internet stuff.
Not Yiddish, but internet.
Not Yiddish.
Thank you very much. Well, it was a little foreign to me too, because I've never done questions interspersed and occasionally forgot to mute myself when I was typing, and I apologize for that. But I hope everybody enjoyed this as much as I did. And Harriet, do you want to say anything? This is your baby.
Yes, very much.
Thank you so much. Herman, you just transport me. I love hearing you read in English and Yiddish, and I'm so appreciative to you and to David and to Temple Micah for making it possible to share.
I want to thank the Temple Micah also for not just this, but for a lot of the things that they do, particularly the Amichai group, which introduced me to a lot of Hebrew poetry that Ed Grossman manages. A very unruly crew it is to manage, but he does it well.
Okay.
Okay. I'm sorry I ran over.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was worth it.
Azisala dunk.
And we've recorded this in case anybody missed it today. You want to, we'll I guess you could send to me or Harriet, and I'll provide the link to you. And it might be posted on either the Micah website or the Living History site, but we'll let you know.
Okay, good.
Okay. Bye-bye.